Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, ricksmithshow.com. Minor little internet blip. You have to take care of that. Or it's the Russians. You know, anytime this stuff happens, you always got to go, it's the Russians hacking into stuff because they're good at it. You got to give them credit. You know, they've meddled in elections and they've meddled in things all across the globe. Why not this program? Anyway, we got Scott back on the line. Scott, thanks for being here.
What's up, man?
So is it the Russians, you think?
Nah, we're not that important. That's a lot of times the security guys, my security guys will say, you're not that important. And if I have a concern, it'll be like, do you think that they hacked into the blah, 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 blah? And they're like, no, you're really not that important. You're not.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I interviewed a guy a number of years ago. What was his name? He's the guy who wrote Confessions of an Economic Hitman. And he talked about, he was one of the guys who would walk into a new dictator's office with a giant sack of money and a bullet and say pick one. and I said, you're telling all these secrets, you're telling all this stuff. He goes, this stuff's old news. It's all there. I'm not that important anymore. Because I asked him, why are you still alive if all of this is true? And he goes, I'm not that important anymore.
Right. Yeah, eventually everybody caught on to the Russia stuff. I'm old news now.
Yeah, I mean, and sadly, I mean, it's almost to the point to where, I was talking to a couple of people today about, the Russian lawyer and all this stuff. And they're like, you know what, I'm burnt out.
Right. And that's what's good about what's next, because what's next is not good for anybody. But it's really healthy for the country. It's sort of like getting chemo. And that's the closest thing I can compare it to, where you're hurting your country in order to make it better. And so we experience this hurt and pain to rebuild and feel joy and peace. And also, I think that we kind of lost our minds in regards to not political correctness, but about the fact that how crazy you could get in politics. And I think there needs to be a hard reset on that. And once Trump is out of office, I think that people are going to hold people accountable at a level that we haven't seen,
I hope that's true. And I hope that we're not so burnt out and we're not so frustrated, not so, just overburdened that we just go, never mind. I don't want head in the sand. Forget about it.
For the past, decade plus, I would see during especially midterms, right after the July 4th weekend, that's where like the final sprint, really occurs. This is always a lull kind of time. I'm guessing as we roll into May here, there's going to be a lot of talk about firing Mueller and Rosenstein, and probably action at this point. I'm not sure what other things that Trump can come up with, but now there's a lot of different things that can happen. I didn't even know. But they could if he fires them, they could turn into immediate whistleblowers and share it with both, sides of Congress. And then the Congress can read it into the record. And that's evidence against him. So I don't think that he's going to actually do it at this point. But if he's desperate, the second you start seeing scandals around Pence, then you're going to see that the end is near at that point.
Yeah. This week, the Senate Judiciary Committee, they, I guess, passed something that would kind of protect Mueller, but now you've got McConnell saying, we're not bringing it anywhere. Your little committee can do whatever it wants. We're not doing anything with it.
Yeah, I put up a billboard in his state. We're putting up one outside of each office that says, pass a bill to protect Mueller, and he refuses to do so. He just doesn't. His excuse is he doesn't think Trump will sign it. And I'm like, well, put it on his desk, because I guarantee it'll pass the Senate and the House. There's no way anybody in trouble, especially on the Republicans, every Democrat will vote for it, but any kind of Republican that's in trouble or even close to it, or I would assume anybody that has a 15-point swing in their district like we had in Arizona would be nervous at this point. So they're going to vote for it because they don't have it. Doesn't seem like a big deal, and if Trump won't sign it anyways. But here's the shocker: if Trump really wants to put this to bed and make a lot of people happy at once, even though it's about a scandal and whether or not he can obstruct justice legally, is is kind of ridiculous as it comes, and the fact that we're even fighting about this is as low as it goes in regards to, you know, Republicans and our democracy. And this is not what they wanted. And I think that good Republicans, and I can't believe I'm saying this, good Republicans like Mitt Romney are gonna come forward. Yeah,
is that where we're going?
That's as close as we. Well, you know, who's Evan? Evan's a good
Evan
guy.
Bayh?
No, not Evan Bayh. He's an old Democrat. Evan,
yeah, that's bad.
McMullen. I like him. He's a good guy. So I mean, like, I think there's some level-headed kind of guys. I mean, you know, Romney has his trouble, but as a Republican, I take him over almost anybody in the party right now because he has the stones to talk about Trump and talk straight to his face, and he's not scared of him. So at least he has, you know, some kind of presence where, but at this point, I don't know who you can trust in that party.
I trust no one. I mean, because, you know, you said, look, I remember Romney coming out and doing the whole speech thing from Utah, and
right,
you know, because everyone thought, you know, he was going to jump into the race and save the country from disaster, and he didn't. He just went and, you know, called a bunch of names and all that, which is fine. And then he goes and has dinner with him, where you go, maybe they're going to try and cabinet post or something. And I'm going, at that moment, lost respect.
Yeah, somebody squashed that. I can't remember who it was. It was probably Bannon, I think, is who did it. But somebody squashed the whatever posted. Well, I can't even remember. There's so many cabinet positions ago. What is it, hundreds? How many people have left the White House now?
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, at this point,
we've crossed. We're in triple digits. We are in triple digits, and I know that they reported in the Post like today or last night that it's clear at this point that this is more than ever. It's like an epidemic. So, you know, I think that their real business is hiring lawyers and lobbyists, and it's just, you know, it stinks. It's not even a swamp anymore. It's just a bunch of swamp monsters running around, and the entire DC is a complete swamp. I don't even know how to talk about it. It's like basically a guy saying that the house isn't on fire, and it's on fire behind him. Saying that there's no swamp here and I'm cleaning up the swamp when he's the swamp monster. The whole thing, I've never seen Washington this corrupt, but I also have never seen this much energy and sass, is that the word? And you know, from Democrats, where they are taking some of the cues that Republicans had, and that's where they're going to be screwed, because when we use the same type of messaging tactics, but with things like healthcare for all, they're going to lose that argument. It just took us a while to catch up, like it does with everything, you know? Yeah,
I mean, it's again, I have hope.
That doesn't sound too confident.
But it's you know, look, you look at the last year and a half, and it's just, you know, every time you think that they've gone too far, you know, they somehow weasel out of it.
Yeah, I think as I tone up the messaging for the general, just from what I have in my perspective, I can reassure you that the messaging that the fact that our intelligence committee chairs could change if we vote in the right people, open up hundreds of investigations immediately, have subpoena power, and control over ethics. That's a complete game changer for this entire country. I think we'll expose things that they never, you know, that they did. The cover up is going to be key, because that's going to be the easiest to prove. And then finding the conspiracy from there. You know, what were they trying to hide, and why are they trying to hide it? Were they doing things illegal? Was Nunes breaking the Espionage Act when he was leaking information to Trump this entire time? Every single month, like I said before, every single month he sends out some stupid document that I have to disprove. And this time it's hundreds of pages of nonsense that actually proves that he did collude or whatever in parts of it. And it's a lot of blab. They don't know, nobody's going to really take the effort to read it except for broadcasters. And it really doesn't do anything. It's like an obstruction of justice report, as in, like, here's what we're going to do to obstruct justice, our last stand, because they can't really do anything else, because I thought they shut down the investigation. So why are they issuing another report? Oh, because the last one didn't work. Oh, because the last one before that, the report on the memo on Carter Page, when I sent out those videos that went viral, all of a sudden their entire messaging was shot of like he should have never been spied on, and then he's sitting there, you know, talking about how he visited with Russian oil from the dossier and how he's pro-Putin and supported Trump, and he was there to talk on behalf of Trump, and had met with Trump a ton of times and thought of him as a thought leader, and had consulted him a lot and trusted him and looked up to him. I mean, it's completely different than what they say in person, and those lies matter, because if you're lying about that, what else are you lying about? And a lot of these people are just pathological when it comes down to it, because they'll go to prison.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to do whatever they can do to protect their behind.
Absolutely.
So talk about the dossier for a minute, because, you know, all I get from my right-wing friends is, Hillary did it, and it's, you know, but okay, I don't care if Hillary started it.
Right.
At the end of it, what was in it was what you just pointed out.
Yeah, so here's what I think. The dossier is an intelligence document. You're supposed to scrutinize every single piece of information in it. Now, in that document, there are dozens of facts. I went through it and I wrote a report, an analysis on it, and there's dozens of facts in regards to the characters, where they work, what they do, where they've been, the timing of things that have been proven 100% for sure. What we see is about 85% of it being accurate, which is a very high number for an intelligence document. Now, this is only a summary. These dozens of pages are just a summary. So that the dossier we've seen, there's, I think, thousands of pages of notes that he has behind all this. And you don't see the, I'd say that so when Steele goes through everything in the dossier, you can tell that it's just bits of information that he's collecting, and he's putting the best parts in this little document that had been released. And in that, it makes it clear. It's not like, you know, if you ignore the urine, ignore that whole, you know, tale about hookers,
sure,
which he probably had hookers. I don't think about the urine thing. Maybe he made a statement about it, like you should pee on it. Like, I could see that. And most people could see that. But I don't think that anything happened like that. And it doesn't matter, because the rest of it comes up with the biggest conspiracy of one of the biggest oil deals of all time, and them being behind it, and them taking a kickback from that oil deal with Russia. And that's what this is about. And so I think that they can discredit it all they want with broad speculation. But when it was initially funded, there was research funded by a conservative, Paul Singer, who also is owns Washington Free Beacon, the conservative blog. And then it went over, I think Hillary, the law firm she returned, like one of the law firms that the Dem Party uses, I think Perkins Coie, sent out, started hiring them as well. I think that's what happened next. So it went from Republicans to Democrats, and then they started digging in for more general information. And then Steele took it upon himself to deliver it to, I believe, McCain, who then McCain took it to the FBI. And during this entire time, British intelligence hasn't said one word or complained or agreed with Trump on any of the assessment of Steele. This has been a guy that saved American lives, more American lives than Trump will ever save. This guy has been involved with saving us from terrorist attacks, and he's one of the most trusted intelligence assets out there. And the fact that he hasn't been out there defending himself is more proof to the testament that this guy knows how important what he put together was, because it's basically showing a pathway of the oil deals that Trump's been involved with for the past few decades. Now, they've already been, Manafort and one of the right hands of his dad have already been charged before for taking kickbacks from oil deals in Russia and Ukraine. You know, involvement in the annexation of Crimea. Paul Manafort apparently helped orchestrate that. Like, there is going to be so much, there's so much behind this dossier, and it's more than that. Yeah. But again, the proof and the links, and what it helped people like me do is I was able to connect dots with evidence I already had. And it confirmed some of the facts I already had in it, but then there were extra names and things I had not thought of before. But it's not like we looked at that and then it was like, let's investigate it more. And I know that the FBI is not, and DOJ is not going to investigate more based on pieces of paper. But based on the evidence that they had of the meetings of dozens of Trump people who met with people who directly report back to Putin during the campaign. I've worked on over 1,000 campaigns. I have never, not once, ever, as a fundraiser, never met with a foreign leader during a campaign. We know that that's wrong. Absolutely. And there's no reason to. It doesn't help you. You can't take foreign money. There's nothing diplomacy-wise that you need to be doing, especially with an adversary. So I see that the whole narrative is going to blow up in his face. The dossier is going to turn out to be mostly credible. People are going to be educated about, what that's based on. And another thing is, the first report that we had, the first dossier on Trump's Russian ties was mine. I gave it to the White House and Congress in 3 days after the election. And, that's a research report based off of tangible evidence. So it's going to be interesting as I do this podcast about investigations, and our first one's on Cohen. So everything that we have, we're going to rehash, and we're also going to include all the other journalist information and have a timeline of the different scams and links to Russia. Those things are going to be dossiers. So we're going to use the words so people are more educated on what a dossier is, how broad the term is, because it's just another term, a Trump term like collusion. You know what I mean? Where it's something sounds fancy, something that is boring, and that's the biggest thing is nobody wants to read it because it's boring. But it's definitely credible. I trust the people behind it more than I'll ever trust Trump.
No, I'm with you, and thank goodness you do that, and I'm looking forward to those episodes. But what do you say? I go back to the dossier, and a couple people have asked, didn't Ted Cruz start this? How does Ted Cruz play into this?
I think Singer might be a funder of. I think Singer, the conservative who originally funded the dossier, might have been linked to Cruz, and I think that's the connection there. I know that Singer also is a donor of Nunes, but he's a very broad Republican donor, and he didn't know what he's fishing for, because what we'll do, it'll literally be something as simple as, I need to find out everything about this person. And then what that means is you go and you do background checks and you vet the person, your opponent. I do the same thing, but more intensely with candidates I work with directly. If the only way to know that, you have to know everything about them, because you can't be caught off guard. So if they have a divorce or a bankruptcy or something like that, arrests,
you got to be prepared for it.
You got to be prepared for it, and you also should know. You have every right to know if you're going to be spending 18 hours a day with a person campaigning for him. You should know them inside and out, and any potential scandal, because you got to be ready to respond to it too. But again, we don't expect to find an international oil conspiracy involving $1 trillion or $500 billion, and Trump and Putin. You don't expect it to all piece together like that. But with everything included, they don't need the dossier to do anything. And so that's the thing, is we don't even need it. It is just further confirmation and further facts that it was kind of like a guide for, here's some potential. And I'm sure that they had some, lower people at the FBI looking at every single detail, because why wouldn't you? Because it comes from a credible source. But it doesn't mean that's not how investigations work. You don't spark it, because their main argument right now is, we're not, the dossier was the basis for opening it, and the dossier is worthless. And now Nunes is saying there was nothing that opened the investigation, as in they didn't have any evidence to open an investigation. Yeah, it was them meeting with Russians. It was them hiring Russian spies. It was them hiring people who are linked to Russian spies and have met with Russian spies while they're an adversary. And they met with them during the campaign. They talked about the campaign. They offered sanctions in return. This is not something where it takes a lot of math, but their arguments of are so simple and stupid that it's hard to fight back. Bottom line is, dossier is credible. That's going to come out more and more, but it's going to trickle more and more out. Because think about how big the story, just one line in it is, of Cohen being in Prague. Just that one thing dented his entire day for 2 or 3 days that carried. So I think this is just going to continue to leak out, and we're going to learn that this has been one of the most helpful intelligence documents of our time.
I hope you're right. And finally, I wanted to ask you about the NRA and the investigation, because it looks like, the Russians have got their tentacles into everything that the Republican Party does. And maybe even at some point we may learn they were attempting to get into the Democratic Party. I'm curious your thoughts of the possible investigation.
Yeah, so there was a delegation that was sent to Russia before the elections and from the NRA. And during that trip, they met and they talked about Trump. They talked about Hillary and the campaigns in the United States. When they came back, they invested over $31 million into Trump in hard cash. On top of that, they invested at least another $15 million in outside money via other groups and subsidiaries that they recommended, endorsements, on top of donors that they recommended give to the super PACs and everything else. So it was right off of that meeting where they came back and all of a sudden, tens of millions of dollars for your campaign right now. And it just, the timing is very questionable. And the people who went over there were very questionable as well. And who they met with, same thing. All these people that they met with, you could even think of Papadopoulos. He met with the foreign Greek defense minister, and he's a direct link to Putin. You can go through every single one of these individuals, and they have such a shady past. It's these are the most corrupt people I've ever seen, ever. And I mean, I've seen corruption rampant in our own party before, in obviously the opposition party. I've seen party leaders fall, come and go, and hundreds of different members of Congress been able to work with dozens. And I'll tell you, this is the most shocking. I've never vetted an entire administration and found scandals, more than one, on every single one except for Rod Rosenstein.
No, I mean, I go back to this, and I said at the very beginning, Ronald Reagan will be very happy. This administration will dwarf the number of people indicted and going to jail, far exceed what Reagan saw during his years. And I'm looking forward to the perp walks day and night. Scott, I appreciate the time.
Anytime.
Good stuff, Scott Dworkin. Again, look out for the podcast that is coming, the Dworkin Report. Important work they do there. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
7, yeah, and I'll go to work at night. I got no time for living, yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
Today is a red letter day. It's a banner day.
EPA chief launches sweeping overhaul restricting EPA's use of science.
Let us face it. There is no planet B.
French President Macron criticizes Trump's inaction on climate change. The vast majority of Americans prefer renewable energy to fossil fuels. Plus, global warming has transformed the Great Barrier Reef, potentially forever.
All of those forever transformations and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I would argue that's the most useless, ineffective holiday since Arbor Day. And I'm sorry, Arbor Day, but your Secretary's Day for trees, and we all need to accept that.
Happy Arbor Day. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I'm afraid Arbor Day really is like Secretary's Day for trees. Looking it up on my calendar, it's not even listed. It was hard to figure out when the hell is Arbor Day.
But you did anyway. Hooray for trees.
Happy Arbor Day.
Well, first up, we have embattled Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Scott Pruitt, who this week proposed a sweeping new rule that would severely limit the types of scientific studies that the EPA can use in developing regulations. Pruitt's deceptive transparency rule would actually restrict the agency to only using studies where the underlying data is public. Now, while that sounds logical, in practice, it would conveniently block the EPA from relying on studies that use confidential patient medical records, the kind that have been used in landmark studies linking pollution and pesticide exposure to harmful health impacts.
Well, that's convenient for him, isn't it?
It is. In an interview with the broadcast, Mother Jones environment reporter Rebecca Lieber said that the rule could permanently weaken the EPA's ability to protect public health.
The EPA, if this rule goes forward and isn't stopped in courts, then they could look at this limited pool of studies and potentially to roll back these standards further and say that's what the science supports.
However, the proposed rule has a special loophole that allows the EPA to rely on industry-funded studies.
There is a generous carve-out for industry in this rule that essentially lets Pruitt personally to decide what gets exempted from this new requirement.
Did you get that? EPA Chief Pruitt can personally exempt certain studies as long as they're from industry. The proposed rule docket is now open for a 30-day public comment period at regulations.gov.
What is it?
Regulations.gov.
Got it.
Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron in the U.S. for an official state visit contrasted his day of hugs and handshakes and backslaps with Donald Trump with a pointed address to a joint session of Congress in which he was highly critical of Trump's policies, including Trump's vow to withdraw from the global Paris Climate Agreement.
I believe in building a better future for our children, which requires offering them a planet that is still habitable in 25 years. Let us face it, there is no planet B. Let us work together in order to make our planet great again and create new jobs and new opportunities. And I'm sure one day the United States will come back and join the Paris Agreement. And I'm sure we can work together to fulfill with you the ambitions of the Global Compact on the environment.
Well, after a day of hugs and kisses with Donald Trump, it's good to hear Macron tell Congress what's really on his mind.
Meanwhile, the impacts of climate change are transforming Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Coral reef scientists warn in a new survey that the world's most famous coral reef could be in irreversible decline after repeated bleaching events caused by surging ocean heat temperatures. Since 2016, several coral bleaching events in a row have killed off approximately half of the Great Barrier Reef, and increasing temperatures and ocean acidification are also killing other corals around the planet. Finally, a recent Gallup survey has found that, in contrast to President Trump's policies, the vast majority of Americans continue to prioritize environmental protection, energy conservation, and developing renewable energy over increasing conventional fossil fuel energy production. Only 21% of Americans in the survey favored increasing oil, gas, and coal versus 60% who said the reverse. The survey found that 73% of Americans said they wanted the U.S. to focus on conservation and developing wind and solar energy more than they wanted to focus on producing more fossil fuels.
And where did you get the idea that this administration has any interest in what the American people think?
Good point.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report. Happy Arbor Day.
I talk to the trees, but they don't listen to me.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So NPR had an interesting little bit that I came across today. Evidently, they went and they talked to some Trump supporters. And I've tried this. It never ends well. But they tried to talk to some Trump supporters, and they found them that they're as angry, as ticked off, and as aggrieved as ever. Forget the fact that their people control all of the levers of power. Never mind the fact that you've got the White House, the House, the Senate, and the Supreme Court, and most of the federal bench. Never mind the reality that is that. They're still angry and they're still ticked off. And the reality is they still think that they're losing the culture wars because we haven't allowed people to beat gay people in public square. We haven't been able to be racist enough or homophobic or misogynist or whatever your particular proclivity is. We haven't been able to do it. And we see stories. Like I saw a story, Waffle House back in the news. Evidently, a black woman went to a Waffle House in Alabama where filled with white people eating and having a high old time. The door was locked. She was told, sorry, we're closed. Waffle House never closes. They're open 24/7. I've never seen a Waffle House close, except when this woman goes. So we're working that way. We're getting to the point where, you know what, we're going to discriminate against. We're going to do it. We're going to make discrimination great again. Anyway, they went and they talked to a couple of these geniuses, and what they came up with was interesting. They talked to this one guy named Kurt, and Kurt said, quote, "We want to be treated with respect, and we will not tolerate anything less, which is just unacceptable for this to continue." He says, "I'm tired of Hollywood spitting on us. I'm tired of academia spitting on us. I'm tired of the news media spitting on us." I don't know that anyone's ever spit on you. And it's kind of interesting because, you stop. There's this great video on Facebook, and it comes around every once in a while, of Trump doing the, throw him out. Back in the old days, we used to know how to take care of those people. And they've taken his words and put it with old film footage from the civil rights era where they're literally yanking people out of seats and beating them in the streets and siccing dogs on them and literally spitting on them. So I do find it ironic that this guy, who I guarantee no one's actually ever spit on, is using that frame. But the other side of it is when you're wrong, when you're so far off to the extreme and you're really a caricature of sanity, you deserve what you're getting. Just kind of throwing it out there. Now, this other guy, the founder of this right-wing news media group, he also told NPR that Trump supporters feel sad. They feel sad when they see comedians making fun of the president. It just makes them, because they want to sit down and they want to enjoy a bit of time in front of the tube. Maybe not watching Fox News, and this is where the argument breaks down for this guy, because most of them are just tuned into fake news. But he says that they watch the Oscars or something, and Trump's getting trashed. They see a comedian, trashing Trump because guess what? He's funny. I listened to this guy's a little bit, and I got to be honest. Did he not pay attention during the Obama years? Was there something that he missed? As well, comedians were mocking Obama and his mommy jeans. Remember that? And the incessant attacks from the right wing. Obama could do nothing right in the eyes of the right. So again, finding it just a little bit bizarre. Now there's the other guy who's evidently a conservative columnist. This guy named Matt Lewis. Who I guess is not a huge Trump supporter, but still on that side. He said that he believed that, he says, I do think that that it's true that conservatives have lost many of the culture wars. They've lost many ways of the culture. And there's a sense on the right that it's apocalyptic and fearful. I actually agree with that assessment. That these are people who they are afraid of being the minority. They're afraid of being treated as badly as they've treated others. And I'll be honest with you, as a white male, you see all of this attacks against white males. I'm kind of worried about it too. And I didn't do anything wrong. So I look at this and I keep asking the question, what's it going to take for us to maybe come back some bit to sanity? These are the folks we're stuck with. And it's, you know, it's just kind of scary stuff in my view. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Share your thoughts early, often. This week, some interesting stories popping out and around. Evidently, the Trump administration lost, I think, 1,500 migrant children. I guess the Department of Health and Human Services, they're tasked with, you know, checking in on the welfare of unaccompanied minors that they've put with sponsors. And evidently, they've lost 1,500. There's no punchline there. This is when you have people who don't believe in government. This is when you have people who don't understand government. This is what happens when you have people who hate government. Lives matter. Things happen to people. 1,500 kids, we don't know. Also, Ben Carson, he wants to triple the rents on the poorest people in the country. And hey, you know what? He's going to need a dinette set. He's got the dinette set, $31,000. He's going to need a bedroom set. Going to need something for the living room, maybe a nice painting, a shower curtain. You know, I hear there's some really fancy ones out there. So there is all of that. We also found out this week, Mick Mulvaney, former congressman from South Carolina, evidently told the American Banking Association that, anybody who gave me money, I listened to. This is the guy who's the interim director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. His job is to oversee the bankers. So let me walk this through with you. So he's in front of a bunch of bankers, telling them that in my office, you can't make this stuff up. In my office, if you didn't give us any money, we didn't talk to you. If lobbyists gave our campaign money or gave us money, we would talk to them. So if you're sitting in the seats there at the big banking convention, what message do you get from that? I'm waiting. I mean, it's not a leap. It's not even a leap. This is him pandering for money. This is him trying to shake down the bankers. This is brilliant. They've put him in charge of the organization that's supposed to oversee the bankers. And what he's telling them is, if you give me money, I'll listen to your concerns. If you give me money, maybe we'll listen to what your problems are. And maybe we'll fix them. Now, look, we've always known this quid pro quo has existed. We've always known this is how the game's played. You make a campaign contribution. You get to talk to the congressman for a couple of minutes or the representative, or in this case, the interim director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And you get to, explain your side of the story. Whether they believe you or not, I guess doesn't really matter, but you write them a check and you get their ear. If you write them another check, you get their ear again. And this is kind of how Mulvaney has been doing business. And I'll be honest, it wasn't a big story this week. I talked about it, earlier in the week, but I didn't see it really anywhere else. It was one of those things that kind of flew under the radar. And it's, hello? Just kind of a thought. Hello? But again, it's how things have gotten. It's how money has corroded and corrupted the entire system. And it's sickening. And finally, the last thing for the week that I wanted to get to, how many people have heard the name Don Blankenship? Don Blankenship is the former head of Massey Energy, convicted criminal, running for the U.S. Senate in West Virginia. In fact, as I said earlier, I actually had considered sending his campaign $20 just so I could try and help him get through the Republican primary. Because one, I think Manchin could maybe beat him. Because look, as much as I don't like Manchin, I still want a Democrat, so that maybe we take back some of the committees. But two, if he does win, it just shows you how corrupt our whole system is. Now, understand, 29 people were killed in the 2010 explosion of coal dust in the mine. And what's just really disgusting about all of this is you've got Blankenship, who's trying to blame Democrats, tries to blame Obama for the explosion. Understand, it was dust in the mine that caused the explosion. And when you have that kind of dust, and look, I'm not a miner, but I've had them explain it. When you have this kind of dust, all it takes is a spark, and it ignites fast. Same thing with wood dust or sugar dust or any of those particulates. The second the spark hits it, it is boom. And that's what happened. And why did it happen? Improper ventilation. He is running for the U.S. Senate. He was asked by CNN whether the people of West Virginia would say that, he had blood on his hands because of the explosion. And his quote is one of those things where you go, boy, you've got huge stones. You really got big stones. He says, I think I would say to him is Upper Big Branch deadly explosion is one of the biggest reasons they should vote for me if they're have a family member or are involved in the coal industry. Unlike any other person that I know of, I stood up against the establishment when they falsely claimed that the explosion was caused by the coal miners. I don't remember anyone saying it was the miners' fault. I remember saying poor ventilation. I remember seeing the memos that he put out that, safety wasn't what you were paid for. You were paid to run coal. I remember that, and it's really amazing to me that this is a guy who's going to say, yeah, you should vote for me because, yeah, I did this. I got to tell you, huge, huge stones. Honestly, truthfully, it just, but it is West Virginia, and I'm really looking forward to the primary. I really am. Anyway, if you've missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Don't forget to tune in Saturday night, 7 p.m., Free Speech TV. Thanks so much. We'll see you back here Monday.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where we're